I will say now I want a heist movie where they they try to figure out which three of them know and they're undercover. And it would not be a very good movie ultimately to steal a silly recipe.
Video
but
game, AC. That'd be a sick fucking video game.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to Can't Let It Go. It's an audio PowerPoint party. My name is Matt. I use he, him pronouns.
My name is AC. I use they, them pronouns.
Welcome back. It's Pride Month.
Woohoo! Happy Pride.
Yeah. Happy Pride. You're getting 2 episodes today.
Whee!
Partially because myself and AC kind of planned poorly and couldn't record the last one. And partially because we also made an active decision. I know we talked about recording an Andor season 2 episode in the past and actively decided not to do that. I know that other podcasts have decided not to do this because if you don't know, Disney Plus is on the BDS list. And that was an input for not doing this episode. Absolutely. I think AC and I talked back and forth and never really came to a conclusion there.
Yeah.
But really a lot of it was that I've actually only watched 9 of the 12 episodes. So I haven't watched the whole thing. But you watched all of it.
I did.
And just from a enjoyment level, didn't really think that I had a ton to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some good moments. I think that if you are someone who enjoyed Andor, first season, and you have a way to get a hold of that content without, breaking BDS, or, if that is something just that you choose to engage with for whatever reason, it's good. It's worth watching. Yeah. And it's not worth us taking an hour or more of your time to dissect because I don't really have anything new to say. I think season 1 is better than season 2, and there were some really good moments in season 2. And choose your own adventure there.
And hey, I pirated that shit, so I'm not afraid to say that on the internet.
Hey,
hey, AC. Today we're going to talk about a drink that has a weird name. It's called The Last Word. And I assume that I've ranted at you about The Last Word in the past.
I mean, I think that the thing is that every time that you've ever ranted at me about The Last Word, we've been in a cocktail bar in our 20s, and I've had at least 4 of those drinks. In fact, I deeply associate this cocktail and our story together as one that you drank often when we would go to a cocktail bar in Tulsa called the Valkyrie. And that was a place that was one of the first mixology bars in Tulsa, when mixology was a cool thing, and being a mixologist was different than being a bartender. If you remember that era of the 2010s, I'm sure you do, Matt. So it's yes, and I was drunk every time that I heard it. So I'm very enthusiastic to hear the story with a clear mind.
Yes, this drink is, I have one right now. I made it for myself before we started.
I love that.
I would say it is a part of an identity that certain people have in their heads of me.
Yeah.
Right? It is a thing that we will be at a cocktail bar and people will say, "What's that drink you like, Matt?" Right?
Yeah, you have a signature drink, and I love that about you. Yes. My signature drink is just whiskey, right? And people also know that about me. I'm not cool enough or evolved enough to have a favorite cocktail, and I love that about you.
I remember in college when for 5 minutes your signature drink was a Tom Collins.
Well, yes, but it turns out that I'm allergic to gin, so... And how did I find this out? Someone said to me when I said I was drinking a bunch of Tom Collinses last night, they said, "AC, aren't you allergic to juniper?" And I said, "And why would that be important in this story?" And that's when I learned that gin is made out of juniper berries. And I am, in fact, allergic to that. So
yeah, it sure is. That's all to say, folks. If you want to take a pause and go get a drink,
hey,
do it. Or keep listening to us while you're mixing yourself something.
Yeah, I am drinking a delightful cocktail called electrolyte water because I'm 35 and I'm going to Warped Tour this weekend. You can listen to our ska episode for why I love ska and Warped Tour and what I'm excited for. But yes, I'm pre-gaming for a day in the heat. Throwing elbows with my best pals.
You're going to that with my husband tomorrow, which he's very excited.
I am so excited that I get to bring this slice of joy. I think like I've had a number of friends who I said, like I'm going to Warped Tour this weekend. They're like, oh, I only ever went once. Or, I went when I was a teenager. I didn't get to go as a teenager. So I am very much anticipating this being like a part of my 12-year-old heart. It will be healed by, going. At least that's what I'm hoping for. So
what is the last word? The strict definition is that it is equal parts gin, green chartreuse, maraschino liqueur, lime juice, equal parts, shaken in a tumbler with ice and strained into a glass.
Okay.
It's very simple to make. There's no like portioning out ingredients. You just fill the same receptacle 4 times, put it into a tumbler, shake with ice, and strain it.
I love that.
And it tastes incredible. It is, obviously, it's got lime juice. It has a lot of lime.
It's sour and floral.
Well, kind of. It's herby. And herby was a word that I heard to describe it that I didn't know how that applied to alcohol when I first had this. But it's also sweet. Jonathan, my husband, thinks it's too sweet. I actually think among cocktails that I've had in the past, it's not as sweet.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wouldn't put sweet as the first taste profile for that, for sure.
Yeah. Like I said, the name is weird. Like you can order a margarita, you can order a Manhattan, but ordering the last word doesn't make sense.
And the is important.
The is part of the name. However, I usually just say, can I have a last word, please?
Yeah.
But whenever you write about the drink, you're kind of expected to call it the last word.
Interesting.
There's a lot of like twists on this. Like there's like the final word. There's like the final ward, which I think is a reference to like somebody else and the bar that they used to make this twist at called something ward. There's the last of the Oaxacans, which replaces gin with mezcal. Yeah.
Wow. I'm so proud of myself for knowing that.
Yeah. There's the bijou, which is like a twist on it, but it's also like, it's a twist on several drinks because the bijou kind of like takes core ingredients from a lot of like favorite cocktails and makes them, into a pretty popular cocktail.
Yeah.
But the last word was originally, well, as far as we know, was originally a Prohibition era cocktail, and it was served at the Detroit Athletic Club as far back as we can tell is 1916. That's the like last time we saw it on a menu or in writing anywhere. And so it's really as far back as we can trace it. We know that it was brought to the Detroit Athletic Club by the singer Frank Fogerty, and he gets talked about in some cases as like the inventor of this drink. But that's nothing he ever claimed. That's nothing anyone who ever knew him ever claimed. It's just said that he brought the drink to the Detroit Athletic Club.
That's so interesting.
The primary way we know about the drink is through Ted Sausier's 1951 cocktail book, Bottoms Up. That is like where we get most of this information.
Yeah. It also is a true cocktail, right? In a classic cocktail understanding, right? Where a true cocktail is a 1-to-1 ratio of all ingredients. Is that right? Something like that.
I don't know that definition, but definitely it is equal parts everything. Which you tell people that and you're like, 3 of those parts are alcohol. And I'm like, I promise you it tastes great.
Yeah. I think about that with like martinis, right? Martinis are a high proof cocktail that is a 1-to-1 often of vodka and vermouth and olive juice or if that's a dirty martini, but with a twist or whatever.
I really cannot do a martini. They are not my favorite drink.
I love a dirty martini. Now, interestingly, many people think of martinis, right, as a gin drink, But I am a dirty vodka martini person. I love a dirty vodka martini. That is something that I have come to in like a way that like replaces a Tom Collins for me. Although Tom Collins is a much sweeter cocktail, it is also in that original sort of cocktail Bible of like the classic cocktail space. And that high proof point is something that I think about too when I think about cocktails versus like a mixed drink.
Yeah, absolutely. We know about this drink because of that book, but we specifically know about the last word because of this bartender named Murray Stenson. I always get this man confused with Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother. Like, I can never remember his name correctly until I'm trying to tell someone this story.
Yeah.
But he rediscovered this drink, and he'll be like very clear in several interviews that this is not his drink, right? He has a quote that says, "I got famous on someone else's drink. That's about it."
Interesting.
But in 2003, he was pouring at the Zigzag Cafe in Seattle. And as he tells it, basically another local bar straight up copied their entire cocktail menu.
Oh.
And they had like just bought this bar. The managers had just bought this bar from the previous owners. And so they were like, we're trying to make this thing work because now we own this thing and it needs to work. So fuck these people. He was like, I'm going to go create my cocktail menu out of liquors that no one has.
And is that where the chartreuse comes in?
So yeah, he was like, he's in this interview, he's like, I have Green Chartreuse, I have Luxardo Maraschino. He was like, those two things, especially at the time, no one had on their bars. Right?
Totally.
Like he says he thinks the Zigzag was the only place that had Luxardo in the bar, period. Green Chartreuse has been in other drinks, so it was a little bit more common, but it still was like extremely uncommon.
Okay.
So he completely rewrites this menu. And another thing he says about it was like he was tired of the like overly sweet cocktails that were on everybody's menus at the time. Mm-hmm. So he was trying to pull things that were doing something different.
Interesting.
So you mentioned the Valkyrie earlier.
Yeah.
How I first heard about the last word was it was during my last Christmas break at Oklahoma State.
Yep.
I was having a drink with my friend Drew at the bar. And I said to the guy, I don't know what I want. Can you give me a recommendation? He was like, what do you want? Do you want something fruity? You want something floral? Do you want something herby? And I was like, herby? What's that? I don't know what that means in the context of alcohol. And he was like, don't worry, I got you. He comes, he hands me this, like one of those, like the giant martini glasses, you know what I'm talking about?
A coupe glass,
that are like,
yeah.
I don't know where they are. They're like super tall.
Yeah.
He's like, here you go. I think you'll like this. And I was like, what is it? He was like, it's called The Last Word. And I had 4 of those that night because I liked it so much. This, like I said, became the drink that I would order. If you go to a restaurant that has a cocktail bar with me, I will often scan the bottles at the bar looking for first Luxardo because it's more common, but then also Green Chartreuse. I know if they have Green Chartreuse, they can pour my drink. Like, yeah, someone there knows it every time. I was at I was at Blend in Boston. Like, Blend is not like a fancy cocktail bar, but they had everything there. Yeah, and I was like, do you have anyone that knows how to pour this? And she was like, oh yeah, our guy knows that. He knows all those like bougie cocktails basically. And I was like, cool. And so I was like at this like essentially club, you know, like drinking my fancy cocktails. It was a good time.
I love that. I was recently watching like one of the Drag Race talkback interviews where I believe Valentina was talking about how she has this very specific order of like champagne with 3 raspberries and something, you know, and it was like, and someone came up and said, oh, thank you. And just like took the drink from her. And she was like, oh, okay. And sometimes I imagine like, that's what it must be like when you were like, hey, can I get this bougie cocktail in this otherwise normal bar?
Yeah. Definitely. To the point that Jonathan I'll be looking and he'll go, can I make your drink? And I was like, I don't know yet. You know, it's often how it goes. I love to order a last word when I'm on a work trip and like maybe like I'm having dinner and like there's a VP or somebody that makes way more money than I do there. Yeah. And they're like, is anyone having a drink? I think I might, as like a way to be like, it's okay to order alcohol. Right. And usually those dinners are at like nicer places, so I can expect people to know how to make it. And it usually becomes like a conversation topic because I'm usually the one ordering off menu. But also it's like, it's fun for me to tell the story about it. There's actually a lot of stories about it, which is why it's been a topic that we've kind of had as like something we could always do since probably season 1.
So what is the story beyond it was created in this, or originally brought to the Detroit, what did you say? It's a club of some kind.
Detroit Athletic Club.
Athletic Club. Yeah. Yes. Back when the Athletic Club was the place that you went to get drinks after your sporting event.
It's still like a private social club that you can still go to.
Cool. So like, other than it's, made famous or originally recorded and written down as on the menu of this club and then picked up by someone else in the 2010s, what is the story of The Last Word?
So you talked about Green Chartreuse already. And while I do think that there are things that we could talk about that are about the entire cocktail, you cannot talk about The Last Word without talking about Green Chartreuse. Have you had Green Chartreuse?
I mean, I've had a Last Word, so yes, but I don't know that I've ever had it like on its own.
Yeah.
I always think of when we're thinking about and talking about Green Chartreuse, and maybe I'll find another moment where I'm like, this is why I think of it. My mind first goes to Saint Germain, because one of my favorite facts about Saint Germain is that it's actually a relatively new liqueur that many people think is historic in, if I'm recalling correctly, the way that Green Chartreuse is. But Saint Germain was like created in the 2000s by someone who had a different elderflower liqueur that then inspired them to make Saint Germain.
I did not know that. That's news to me.
Yeah.
Green Chartreuse is the thing that makes a Last Word taste herby like that. Like it does. It's the thing that kind of, besides the alcohol, that like burns your tongue in the aftertaste, right? It's the thing that adds the like flavor spice, not the alcohol spice, right?
Okay.
It is an alcohol made of 130 herbs and other ingredients.
Okay.
And it is made by Carthusian monks in France. This might be apocryphal. I'm not 100% sure because the story like changes, but like it is said that there's only 2 to 3 of them that like actually know the recipe. But apparently the recipe's like also locked inside a vault inside the monastery.
And how many years have they been making this chartreuse? Like, if only 2 people know it, how is this passed down?
So the recipe itself has a history going back to 1605, and it's been the primary income source for the Green Chartreuse monastery for about 300 years. It was introduced in 1764, like as a thing they could, they were like selling to people. Oh, that's so interesting. Was it, and is it introduced as like a liqueur in like the medicinal way that like many of these historic like herbaceous liqueurs were? Yeah. So it was almost like there was a brief. This French Marshal of Artillery for King Henry IV was like, I need you to make me an elixir of life. Oh. And easy. Yeah, done. Exactly. I forget exactly like who makes this recipe. But it has this complicated history that kind of passes back and forth where people are like trading and selling this recipe and like in some cases like stealing it from each other. And it passes through several hands in various parts of history. And at one point it's actually kind of widely known in like that portion of Europe. But eventually this like movement and also morphing of this recipe ends up resting at Green Chartreuse. And then the monks end up perfecting that recipe that we now know as Green Chartreuse there. And that's the recipe that's been both lost to time, but also like their specific take on it is kept as like a really, really tight secret. Okay. There are other versions. So there's like the original. I can't do French. It's the language that I cannot pronounce. But you'll see like elixir something de la Grande Chartreuse. And they still sell that version. Mostly the difference is that it's like higher alcohol content, which is why it was used for like medicinal stuff.
Okay.
There is a version that you will see honestly more often at bars than green chartreuse is yellow chartreuse.
Okay.
Yellow chartreuse is sweeter. It's based on grape spirits, where green chartreuse is based on sugar beet spirits. So it's just got like a little more of a natural, but also herby taste than the yellow chartreuse does.
So have you had it? I mean, presumably you have sampled it on its own. What is it like? Like, I go to a bar and I'm ordering, can I just get a sipper of green chartreuse? What is the bartender's face going to be like?
Don't do that. They're going to be like, no, that's dumb. It is absolutely an ingredient. I will say, especially in like parts of France, you can absolutely order a shot of green chartreuse and that's not weird.
Okay.
If you are American, don't do that.
Yeah.
And you probably won't like it either. Like, I've had it straight up in a glass and it's fine. It's got a bite, but I don't know if you know that kind of biting flavor from the last word, it's that in its purest form.
And does it fall into one of the like aperitif or digestif categories?
It has been, I don't know like how it's used or how it's classified officially or anything like that, or by who officially, what does that mean? But
yeah,
I do know that it has been used as a digestif in the past.
Okay.
Especially in places like France where it originated, where people are ordering it as shots or in a glass with ice or just in a glass straight up.
Sure.
As an after dinner drink or something.
Yeah. And like, I think of the difference, like, right. And this is also in the name of aperitif versus digestif. And aperitif, right, is something you drink before a meal to stimulate your appetite. A digestif, something that has, how many herbs did you say? Herbs and spices?
130.
100 and... Yeah, Dr. Pepper could never. 130 herbs and spices is like to help with digestion. So a digestif literally meaning.
I have it right here.
Oh, wow. It's such an iconic label too.
Yes.
Like, I know, like, I can pick, obviously it says chartreuse really big on the bottle, but if I were to close my eyes and try to envision it, I would be able to say in a dark bar, that one with the big green label on it, I know that is chartreuse.
Yeah. Here, actually, it's worth reading the back of this bottle. They tell a little bit of the story.
Let's hear it.
Chartreuse is made only by Carthusian monks of Le Grand Chartreuse near, I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm going to try, Grenoble, France?
Yeah, Grenoble. That's right. Yeah.
Chartreuse today is still made from 130 alpine herbs according to an ancient 1605 formula. We already know from this episode that's kind of not true.
Okay.
The secret method of preparation is shared by 3 Carthusian brothers and is protected by vows of silence. Literally every other source online you'll find is 2.
Oh.
But also I saw somewhere online that was like, there's 2 that know half the recipe, and then there's like 1 like brother who knows the whole thing that like oversees things. I don't know. You hear different stories. Chartreuse is sold in America as a green or yellow liqueur, the latter being sweeter and milder. Each type is also available in rare VEP. VEP is like French to mean like extremely old. It's basically just aged longer.
This is like in Italian goods, I think it's no. I'm going to have to look it up. It's like a DGE or something, like is like the designation to tell you that like this is an official product from like this region of Europe and has been certified in that way. There's a thing about like Neapolitan pizza can only be Neapolitan. You can only call it Neapolitan pizza. Like if you use specifically San Marzano tomatoes, specifically flour from a specific region, like that, if it's not one of those, and it's also like a label on wine sometimes to certify that it is from like, maybe it's DOE, maybe it's like European. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Someone who knows more can tell me in the comments.
I was going to say, get in the Discord, tell us. This is actually interesting. And this is something that I didn't know for a very long time. The only liqueur to have a color named after it, Chartreuse, is also famous for a flavor and fragrance totally unexpected, remarkably beguiling, unique in all the world. The color Chartreuse is named after this alcohol.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, chartreuse is one of my favorite colors. I love that bright green color. And so I had no idea that it was like named after the liqueur, not just like originated from the same region of France as I would have guessed.
Yeah. I didn't know that either, and I assumed that Chartreuse, the alcohol, was named after the color because that is the color that it is, and it's naturally occurring. Like, there's no food coloring in Chartreuse.
Fascinating. Just 130 herbs and spices.
Just 130 herbs and spices. Chartreuse is most popular when mixed with tonic or soda in a tall glass with ice. That sounds gross. Accented by a slice of lemon or lime, but can also be enjoyed on the rocks. So they think you can do whatever you want with it. I think that a lot of those would be nasty. This history it's like on the bottle. It's right there, but also I find it fascinating. Like, this is the coolest thing about this drink to me, is that it's like nearing like 400 years old, and that it has such like a modern mainstream handle on cocktail culture. Like, I mean, you could say the same thing about vodka, but like, Chartreuse is specific enough and interesting enough, and like feels like this kind of like thing that like only like cocktail nerds know about, but it also goes that far back.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, like, of course, many of the liquors that we drink, right, these standard liquors are standard. They have existed for hundreds of years. Things like Agrippa, right, like, which is an Italian digestif that will absolutely ruin your life, and people only drink it 2 a.m. when you've done so many shots of limoncello and everything else that you can't say no, right? Like, or ouzo, right? These very herbal, very high proof liqueurs that are intended for shooting. I think it's very interesting that this is not in that category, but has like a similarly like long history. Is it like very like, and maybe you don't know, but you would be the person to ask in my mind, is it like a cultural like French thing to like really care about Chartreuse?
I don't know 100%, but the vibe that I get is that like, yeah, more so than here, but not like, it's not like the French are particularly proud of Chartreuse, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, it is only called Chartreuse if it comes from the Chartreuse region of France.
So that's the thing, is literally it cannot come from anywhere else. And I don't even mean like in the way that, you know, whatever other thing, Bordeaux, right, can only come from Bordeaux. Like, literally the recipe does not exist anywhere. So if you make anything else, it is only an approximation.
Okay.
There are plenty of other alcohols similar to Green Chartreuse that are trying to be Green Chartreuse replacements that don't make it. There's tons of these, but there's like one that the name is Genepi de Alpes. It is as close as I think you can get without being Green Chartreuse. And you taste the two next to each other without thinking too hard, you will notice the difference. Like, I'm not talking about like being in a tasting room. I'm talking about like being drunk at a party and your friend hands you 2 shots and like you're going to notice the difference.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
When I have not been able to find Green Chartreuse, I've made it with Genepi, and it's the last word is like, okay, right? It's still pretty good. It still feels like a last word to me, but it's not the same. It tastes different.
Yeah. Interesting.
The crazy thing about it being so specific is that there are only like around 300 Carthusian monks across 21 different monasteries.
Oh.
We don't know how many are in Grand Chartreuse, but it can't be a lot.
Huh.
Which means that all of those monks, say 20, 50, are the ones responsible for the world's entire supply of Green Chartreuse. Carthusian
monks, are they Jesuit? Are they Franciscan? Like, you go into, like, you become a monk of this religious order because you really like Chartreuse and you want to make Chartreuse for the rest of your life, or like you won't know if that's where you get assigned if you become this kind of monk. Like,
they are an enclosed like order of the Catholic Church. So they are essentially their own thing that is a part of the Catholic Church. So becoming a Carthusian monk is like not going to happen to just a random person.
Okay. But if you wanted to like, I mean, I think that like coming from the background of like being Catholic, knowing like I could choose to be a Franciscan monk, right?
Yep.
I could choose to become a Jesuit, right? Like I can choose the order that I want to go into my monastic practice. Can you choose to be you can choose to be a Carthusian monk?
Yeah, they have a very specific rite.
Okay.
They hold themselves to. So I'm reading directly from Wikipedia here because I was on this page while researching this today. It says, apart from the new elements in the 1981 revision, it is substantially the rite of Grenoble in the 12th century with some admixture from other sources. So that's the Carthusian rite is what they're talking about there.
Okay.
Among other differences from the Roman order of Mass, the deacon prepares the gifts while epistle is being sung. It's just, a bunch of these kinds of things.
Sure.
Just a very specific rite of the Catholic Church that is really in that area of France and really centralized and localized to that place.
Okay, so I think I'm square on Carthusian monks. I mean, I'm not going to go into monastic practice anytime soon, but...
So I will say, while we pause there for a second, I did look into it a little bit, and it seems like in the past, at least, there have been monasteries in England, in Scotland, and some of them still are there, but the majority of Carthusian monks are in Green Chartreuse. To this day. So of those 300 something, most of them are in this very specific area of France, even if some of them are in smaller monasteries.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is not what we're talking about today, but I'm always interested by like what calls someone to go into monastic practice, how they choose what monastic practice they're like most interested in. And then like from a Catholicism perspective, I'm always interested in like the global politics of the Catholic Church and like, are all of these monks, are they mostly from France, right? Because of the presence of the Carthusian monks in that area. Like, are there people from all over the world? Like some monastic traditions have people from everywhere. Some are much more insular. So anyway, a digression that I will look into later.
I'll say one piece is that Wikipedia tells me that generally those wishing to enter must be between the ages of 21 and 45, and that they have to go through a medical examination. So there is some, at least in age, some aspect of like who we're letting into this, practice. But I don't know that there's more than that.
I will say now I want a heist movie where they they try to figure out which three of them know and they're undercover, and it would not be a very good movie ultimately.
No,
to steal a silly
sick
recipe.
Video
but
game, AC. That'd be a sick fucking video game. Oh man, there is a video game jam coming up in the Worst Garbage Discord in July. If anyone wants to make that video game with me,
trying to put together the recipe for chartreuse, like you have to gather all 130 herbs and ask the right people the right questions in the right order. That would be really fun.
Yeah,
like a good puzzle game.
Oh man, I'm like grinning. That's such a good idea.
In my mind, it could even be like, what's that roguelike that you're all obsessed with right now?
Oh, Blueprints.
The mystery.
Blueprints.
Yes. That everybody was talking about in the Discord for a while. I feel like there could be a fun version of that too, where you're like going into the different rooms or areas. Like, can you get to the distillery? Even if you've acquired all of the ingredients, can you get into the distillery? Can you do that? Anyway, someone make that. It'd be fun.
Hit me up if you want to do that for the game jam. We'll do it. But because this is the only place that makes this alcohol, that it's the source of chartreuse for the entire world. And I bet you can imagine where this next bit is going.
Supply chain shortage?
It's a surprise COVID episode.
Whee! Hooray! Our world has changed indelibly because of a global pandemic. I love it.
So people drank a lot during COVID. Weirdly, did you drink a lot during COVID?
Yes. During the first 6 months, yes. Like so much so that my partner and I had to sit down and have a conversation where we're like, maybe we need to stop drinking.
Yeah.
We were like buying like liquor from Costco kind of thing,
I actually drink way less. It's how I learned that I mostly drink socially. And you know me now, I basically never drink.
Yeah. It's much more rare. I mean, I think it's also really interesting too. Younger people drink less than they did before, and they're more likely to like, smoke weed or something like that than they are to drink. And I think that like cultural understandings around alcohol, both during the pandemic and even before, even in the lead up, we have experienced in the last 10 years a strong cultural shift around alcohol and alcohol consumption. So I think that it's, both notable and also not weird. And I say in the last 10 years as though we didn't also like hit that over 30 bump where everybody reevaluates their life choices.
I'm on a lot of medications now, and some of them make me feel like absolute shit when I drink. And so I cannot do it very often. And I absolutely cannot do more than like one cocktail in an evening anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the last word is not only my favorite drink, it is a lot of people's favorite drink. And while interest in Chartreuse kind of like curved off around the early 2010s, towards the end of the 2010s, the last word specifically was becoming a popular drink again. And therefore, Chartreuse was becoming popular again, and people were making more drinks with Chartreuse in them. The Bijou is now a pretty popular drink. And you can find a variant of the last word, even if it doesn't have green chartreuse, it might have other ingredients on most cocktail bar like menus. And even if you can't find one at a real cocktail bar, bartenders know how to make it. It is a bartender's drink. But yeah, because everyone was drinking a lot during lockdown, green chartreuse became extremely hard to find. The way that I wrote it down for myself was that it became harder to find than NVIDIA graphic cards, which like means a lot for that very specific amount of time or specific period of time.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember trying to get Jonathan NVIDIA 3080 graphics card, and we had like 5 or 6 different times over 2 years where we thought we had nailed it, and it like slipped through our fingers.
Yeah.
And I had a way harder time finding green chartreuse between 21 and 23.
Fascinating.
I'll say, like I said, 23, right? So we're not in like pure lockdown anymore at this point.
Yeah.
In 23, it was still so difficult that I'd been looking for 2 years to find a single bottle of green chartreuse. The bottle that I find, this bottle, AC, the one that we've been reading from, I've never bought another bottle of this stuff. I was stumbled into that liquor store in Utica Square.
Sure.
And like it was the day before Thanksgiving, and I stumbled in. They happened to have one. He said he had it, and I immediately spent $75 on a bottle of liquor.
Absolutely.
And Jonathan was like, what the fuck was that charge? And I was like, green chartreuse. And he was like, okay. Oh yeah, you should have done it.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Do you think, and this is just me speculating, I know that you moved back to Oklahoma in 21. Was this like a global shortage of this? Or was it specifically like you moved to a place where it's just also more rare to find it generally?
So it's both of those things. It was not as hard on the East Coast, but not much better. Like really not much better. It's still difficult, even now as the shortage has eased a little bit. From like I can't walk into a liquor store and know it's going to be there.
Yeah.
Whereas like when we lived in Palo Alto in like 2015, I saw it on the shelf many times and was just a poor grad student and couldn't afford it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I don't go to like the ABC store that often, but if I did, I could pick up a bottle like once or twice a month.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest thing to find.
If you were drinking that much green chartreuse, I would be a little worried.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that demand has continued to rise. But actually pre-COVID, like 2019, like end of 2019, the monks stopped increasing their capacity every year. And in fact, in recent years have decreased their output.
Fascinating.
They basically were like, hey, we're monks, not a liquor manufacturer.
Yeah.
Like, we're here to devote our time to God. So that's what we're going to do. We make liquor to fund our lives.
Yeah, we make liquor to fund our worship of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Yes. And so they have like cut back how much they're producing, which added on to then a global pandemic where people are drinking more. You just like all of 2020, there was not a way to get green chartreuse for most
Fascinating.
people. Some bars had it. I remember the week we moved to Tulsa in 21. It was like it was June 21. We went to the Valkyrie and I asked for one. He was like, I have one drink's worth of green chartreuse right now, and I don't know that I will get another bottle this year.
Yeah.
And I was like, give it to me.
Wow. Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, like, in a way it makes sense, right? Like, I don't think that these monks are like, we're resisting global capitalism by reducing our output, but there is something very interesting there of like, this is something that we are doing as our source of income, not to like make a profit,
Yes.
right? Not to have be subject to the wills of the profit making machine or the demand machine. There will be this much supply and everyone else will deal with it, which does bring me to another question. Is there like, is counterfeiting part of this? Like, I will never get over, do you know about like maple syrup counterfeiting?
I've heard about it. I don't know.
And
a
like
ton
maple
about it.
syrup theft. Like there is like a whole, there are several documentaries that document like heists that have taken place about stealing real maple syrup, or stealing people's syrup recipes. Like, it is a similarly like well guarded product. That is often imitated, never replicated, right? Like, you can tell the difference between real maple syrup versus like pancake syrup that you buy in the store, whether that's Log Cabin or, you know, one of the other, I'm trying to think of what's the brand with the pancakes on the bottle. I don't remember. It's not important.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. Pancake syrup and maple syrup are two different things. One has maple flavoring. So, like, is that something that exists in the green chartreuse world?
If it exists, it hasn't been brought to light. But I would also argue, and like, you may think this is bogus. You may be like, people can't actually tell the difference, right?
Sure.
That's how I feel about audiophiles. And I'm an audio guy. I think people, especially people that care a lot about green chartreuse, absolutely know the difference. And like, your layman like me who cares about green chartreuse can tell the difference. So I think counterfeiting would, sorry, I'm like, I really cannot handle alcohol anymore, and I'm 3/4 through this thing.
A little tipsy.
But yeah, I think most people that are interested would be able to tell. There are, like I said, mini replacements that have been created, and people buy those, one, because they're cheaper, but two, because they're available.
Yeah.
And some people prefer them. I don't think a lot of people are out there being like, Genepieda Alps is better. They might be like, Genepieda Alps is good and I like it differently, or I like a last word made with this differently than I like a last word made with green chartreuse.
Interesting.
And I know that like Luxardo has its own green liqueur, which is supposed to be herbal, that is like very different. To be totally honest, I've had like a sip of it once, but frankly, I don't really remember it much. I just remember being like, that's not chartreuse.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while, someone will come up with a new brand that has made something close, but usually it's like a small, distillery that like, and then that becomes rare.
Yeah.
There was one recently, I forget what they were called. It was a word that meant green. It basically was impossible to find, and now they don't exist anymore. You can't find it anymore. But their whole thing was like, we actually have seen the recipe. And like, I doubt it, but that was the brand that they were selling us,
Fascinating. Okay. Is there anything else about green chartreuse before I launch into a whole other set of questions that I have for you about the last word?
One thing, I mentioned brands and companies. Chartreuse Diffusion is a company that was started in the 70s, and they work with the monks of Grand Chartreuse. They do all the marketing and bottling and distributing of the product that we know as green chartreuse, and some products that are available in European countries that we don't get access to.
Okay.
So that's just like a piece of the puzzle that is important to know. And like, actually, they don't actually do the bottling and they actually do parts of the distilling that like don't happen at the monastery anymore. They do a lot of that in a very different part of France that's like not near Grenoble anymore, because there were some safety issues and some distribution issues that they moved the factory in 2017. So just a little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Okay. So my other question is, does it matter what type of gin you use? For people who are gin drinkers, you will know that there are lots of different types of gin. And in fact, not all types of gin are even made with juniper berries. Although that information is also hard to track down. I, as someone who really loves like the floral nature of gin, but is allergic to juniper, I have spent a lot of time trying to find gin alternatives and like just haven't found anything that comes close in a way that I like. So that's my question for you. Does it matter what kind of gin you use?
So the cool thing about cocktails generally is that everyone has their twist on the thing, right? And so I think a purist might say, sure, it matters, right? But it's important to know that the original that we know of, the original The Last Word, the one at the Detroit Athletic Club, was a Prohibition era drink. Meaning it was literally made with bathtub gin.
Heck yeah.
The gin that we've got is much higher quality than that. You are not getting the original The Last Word. I have never had an original The Last Word.
Yeah. It was made with gin that would make, I think we always make that joke of like a single like bit of Dorito dust would kill a small Victorian child, when in reality, the gin that they made The Last Word with would probably make me blind today.
Yes, exactly.
Because of how potent it was.
Which is to say, I really love Hendrick's gin. I think Hendrick's is my favorite brand generally. And I specifically love, I don't even know if they make this anymore, it's just the one that I still have because I don't drink very often, is Hendrick's Neptunia.
Okay.
Which I've heard is like a hot take. It's apparently not there. It's like the least favorite one of their kind of like, not quite flavored, but varietals essentially.
Interesting.
It has like a more earthy flavor than the other gins, but also like their other versions. They've got one that's a little more floral, that has more juniper, kind of flavors. And then they have just straight up Hendrick's, which I also like. But this one I'm drinking right here is made with Hendrick's Neptunia. And I think a purist might be like, that's not a Last Word.
Sure. I think that's interesting though, because like what you said about the chartreuse being made with like the sugar beet alcohol, I think an earthiness to a gin would lend itself to that, right? Like would blend really well with those flavors. So I don't know, fuck the purists. Like we like what we like, right?
Yeah. I'll say it. If you like gin, not you, obviously, but if you're listening and you like gin and you can find Hendrick's Neptunia, I think it's drinkable on its own. Don't do it very often, but I think it's drinkable on its own.
Yeah.
I want to tell a couple stories that are just my weird connections to The Last Word.
Yeah, please.
Which I'll start with. In 2013, I went to a big tech interview in Seattle. You can guess where. And they put me up in this like fancy hotel, and I think it was like the first time I'd like stayed in like a nice hotel, and the first time that really I had like been paid to travel very far for a interview. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make a night of it. And I went to the concierge and I was like, hey, I'm looking for a cocktail bar. And he kind of laughed. He was like, Seattle's a cocktail city. You got to be more specific. And I was like, well, here, I like a Last Word. And he's like, what do you want to eat? I was like, I'm feeling like a burger tonight. And so he points me to this bar. I'm not going to remember the name of the bar, but I go there, I order a burger. It's really good. It's not the best thing I've ever eaten, but I order a Last Word, and the bartender says, well, did you know that the guy who discovered this drink, Murray Stenson, like pours in Seattle? At this point, I didn't know that story. This is how I'm introduced to that story. And he was like, he actually pours at a bar like 3 doors down some nights. You might go over there and see if he's there. So I finish my burger. I go over and I go to the bar, and I was like, I was told Murray Stenson might be pouring tonight. He was like, oh, no, he's down at Il Bistro. But if you want a Last Word, I'm happy to pour you one. I was like, sure, I'll sit down and have a drink. Whatever. I just, chat with this bartender about, I'm doing this interview, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And I have the drink. I get in the Uber and I go back to the hotel. The restaurant that Murray Stenson is pouring at turns out to be across the street from my hotel.
Oh my gosh.
And I get out, I see the name Il Bistro, and I think, it's like 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. I have an interview at like 7 in the morning. I'm just going to go to bed.
Yeah.
So I went in the hotel, I went to bed. I still bombed the interview. It doesn't matter. I never meet Murray Stenson. That's the spoiler there.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 2017. I'm at this work event at that restaurant Zaytenya, the Jose Andres
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I'm having a drink at the bar, and I order a last word, and the bartender's like, "Are you a bartender?" I was like, "No," and he was like, "Oh, it's just kind of like a bartender's drink or a cocktail nerd drink." And I was like, "Yeah," and I tell him the story about how I found out. I tell him the Seattle story.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Cool," and he just starts like pouring me random like takes on the last word. This is how I have a bijou for the first time. And like, this is actually how I taste chartreuse alone for the first time.
Cool.
And so, we're chatting. At this point, I have made friends with bartenders over this drink so many times that like, this is just a fun, normal thing. And my boss, because I'm on a work event, walks up, hears me talking about the last word with this bartender and goes, "Are you drinking last words?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "The guy who invented that thing was my landlord in Seattle."
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, "Murray Stenson?" He was like, "Yeah, he used to like have me over to his bar and pour me drinks." I was like, "You just hung out at the Zigzag with Murray Stenson?" He was like,
"That's
Matt, how
crazy.
the fuck do you know this?" And I proceed to do a Can't Let It Go episode at Zaytenya for my boss. And then, just by the way, unrelated, we had an incredible dinner at Zaytenya. If you ever go there, have the lamb shoulder. Make sure somebody else is paying for it because it's $125. But
it's good, though. It is worth
really
it.
good. I will say it's family style, so you can split the cost.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, I love making friends with the bartender for any number of reasons. One, it is tip your bartenders, be nice to them, right? They have hard jobs. But also I love that experience of like finding someone who is like, maybe it's a slow night at the bar or whatever, and just like bonding over not necessarily a love of drinking, right? Which I mean, I do enjoy, but an understanding that like alcohol there is like a rich experience and tradition to be had in trying different alcohols. And that like, I think we think about sommeliers, right, as like this really, really advanced, really kind of snooty thing that you can do to get really, really well versed in wine. And as diverse as the wine world is, so too is the world of cocktails. And so I think that I just love that sense of camaraderie that comes about from being someone who is interested in that.
I love it too. I wish there were more people that weren't white guys with handlebar mustaches that were into it.
Too true, Matt. Too true. I mean, and that also speaks to like the 2010s, like that mixologist vibe, right? The hipster, like, and like the real connection that like hipsterdom and mixology had of like what do they call them now? What's the word that I'm looking for? We used to say womanizer, but that's not what it is anymore. What am I looking for, Matt?
I don't know.
Male manipulator vibes.
Is that what we're saying?
I don't know.
I've never heard that one.
Now I feel like you would say like someone has a manipulator mustache, right?
You're not gonna see me. That's fine.
Your camera, has decided to take a break. It said it's 90 degrees outside. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Which is also how I feel. So anyway, that like male manipulator vibes, the womanizer, right? Like, I mean, we've already established that I'm old in this episode. But Britney Spears would call it a womanizer, and that's good enough for me.
She sure would. The stinger to this episode is that Murray Stenson died in 2023.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. I don't know if he was a good dude, but people liked him and he made a good drink. So he actually, this is just a weird connection. I didn't know this, but he died from complications of Guillain-Barré syndrome, which we've talked about extensively in the Sufjan episode.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that until researching this, but just generally, I'm glad he pulled this recipe from a random book, right? Like, you were talking about like the history of cocktails and like comparing it to the history of wine. But like a thing that I'm really passionate about is that like modern history is as important as the rest of history. Like you can build a culture in 10 years as much as you can build a culture over thousands. And that's something I look for in both stories and people's understanding of the world. And I just think it's cool that this guy found a book in 2003 and like brought a culture that had existed and had not existed for a long time into the present and made it its own thing, right?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the last word on the last word.
I have been thinking this whole time about how I'm actually going to get the last word in this last word episode. But, maybe I'll let you have it this time.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to say before we sign off?
No, just that I miss drinking gin. We were so cool and so snobby to be little 20-year-olds who were like, oh, we prefer gin cocktails, actually.
We did do that.
Like we're so cool. And you know what? We were. I will actually, no, you said any last words and I said no. But I one additional note about Valkyrie that I will never forget. Do you remember we were there together once and we were doing the thing that you did at that bar, which was tell the bartender like what kind of flavor notes you were interested in. And I said that I liked herbal and smoky, and he like put a whole like giant sprig of rosemary,
oh my
like a
God,
whole tree.
Yes.
And we made these jokes about how it was like a whole ass tree. When I say a sprig of rosemary, you may be imagining a single little stem. No, this was like 10 little tendrils of rosemary along a stem large enough to still have like the woody part of rosemary. Like it was a whole ass tree in my drink.
He gave you a crudité.
Valkyrie, yeah. Could have, made a nice like, chicken rosemary dinner with that. Valkyrie is also the place where I learned that you slap your herbs to release the oils. I mean, I think of it as so important because you don't want to over crush them. I like things that I know now, like from the culinary world, I think of as like having core memories of this bar that still exists in Tulsa. I have no idea.
Very fratty these days.
Okay, great. I was going to say I have no idea what it's like anymore because I'm not really going to cocktail bars in a place I don't live. But I have such fond memories of drinking cocktails with you. And like, I think of so much of our experience of like being interested in these things for a young age and at a young age and maybe not knowing why. Like, I love seeing how this has become a signature thing for you over time.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah.
Hey, if you like the show, you can find us at can'tletitgo.gay.
Wow.
You can find me at matthorton.live. AC, where can people find you?
You can find me at acfaci.com and on Blue Sky at acfaci.bisky.social. Got it right again.
You did.
That's 2 out of however many times that I've gotten it wrong.
You can also find the show at can'tletitgo.gay on Blue Sky. That is the only social presence that we have. Besides the Discord. You should come hang out in the Worst Garbage Discord. That's a link on can'tletitgo.gay and on the worstgarbage.online. Speaking of them, thanks to TWG for having us. We love y'all. I heard a really good episode of Girl Mode about Summer Game Fest today.
Very exciting.
I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah. And come to our Summer Game Jam and make a video game about the last word with Matt, I guess.
Yeah. Let's do it. I'm excited. Shout out to the people that help make the show. Scout, thank you so much for your art. You can pay her to make you something at ko-fi.com/humblegoat. And shout out to my friend Ethan, who is revolverocelot.bsky.social. He made our music.
Yeah.
And also, you're going to have another episode to listen to right now because it's Pride and we love you that much.
I love you so much.
We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
TWG, the worst garbage, online.